You were all a very integral part in your prayers, but we wanted to give you a glimpse of kind of all that went into this process over the last couple of years. So I'm going to act as the interviewer, and here are my interviewees to kind of speak a little bit to that process. So I invite you into that with us this morning, and write some questions down and have them for afterwards. First of all, I wanted the search committee, the rest of the search committee that's not up here, just to stand for a second so that we can refresh ourselves on who was involved in that process. And this process has started back in spring 2 years ago. It will be 2 years this spring, right? If you need someone to ask questions to, these are the folks to do that. You guys can sit down. So Mark Colwell was the chair of the search committee. So Mark, I kind of wanted to start with you and ask you a little bit about that process. Can you tell us a little bit about the process that was used? What kind of resources did we use during that process? What kind of things were discussed early on to kind of set the basis for how the team would function?
So first, I just want to say thank you to those people that were standing. It's unbelievable the amount of work and prayer and thought that went into this process. And the people that were standing there, and these people with me and Larry, just the sincerity of the work that they did. You'll never know really what we've put into this, and I'm really grateful to those people. The first part of the process was really Pastor Doug and Barb giving the church ample time to find a replacement. And I know I'm shaking and I'm nervous, but that's how much this process really meant to us. And we're grateful that they gave us that time to find a person to try to replace their ministry. The first step was then to form the committee. And the way that committee was formed was the elders decided who they wanted on that committee. And once we formed the committee, we added a couple more people to round out the team. And the committee was really tasked with fielding applicants, screening those applicants, and then recommending our best choice to the congregation for their vote. The search process, we began by reading a couple books by a headhunter group. Pastor Chris and Pastor Doug both contacted the Vanderblumen church headhunting group from California to get their recommendations. We met with other churches to find out what they did, what they recommended for successful churches or successful searches, and also what they did with searches that didn't go so well. So we asked a lot of people, what their process looked like, what went well, what didn't. And on top of that, we just talked to as many people as we could, did as much research as we could, and then we started the process. So once we had that framework intact, we started the process, and what we did was we really started to look at the vision of the church. And we always see, even on a bulletin, it says, Kish, real life, one person at a time. And we ask ourselves as a group, what does that mean? Not just the nice saying, but what does that mean? And this process ended up spilling over into the leadership with the elders, the deacon board, student ministry, children's ministry, and that developed really the vision and the mission statements of not only our group, but they've worked now with the elders and those other groups I mentioned to drive the whole vision of the entire church. We made it clear early in the process that we couldn't just make our search about finding a clone for Pastor Doug. He's uniquely gifted. And it wouldn't be fair to him to try and find a clone, and it's not going to be fair to the next person to find, his clone. So we started to look at some non-negotiable traits that we need as a church, that we value with Pastor Doug, and also lined up with the vision and the mission statement that we came up with as a group, and the elders with the most important values that they saw as a church. And that's really, we spent a lot of months just coming up with that to write the initial job description before we even looked at trying to find an applicant. Some of those non-negotiable traits that we knew we had to have were humility and integrity. And we wrote that right into the job description, that the person must be a humble man of integrity. And we also recognized that we needed to find a relationship-driven leader. This process was not taken lightly at all. We wanted to make sure, though, first we knew who we were as Kish, who we were looking for, and we decided in one of the first meetings that when we did find that person, that it would have to be a unanimous decision from the search committee to recommend that person to the congregation. We were not willing to say 50-50 or 50+1 or 75. We decided at one of the first meetings, whoever we recommended would be a unanimous decision by the entire committee.
Great, thanks, Mark. Next question is for Deb. Deb, can you talk a little bit about the importance of prayer through the search process, especially about the prayer team that you put together and kind of headed up?
Yeah, I'm going to start by reading from Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight. I feel like these verses have been our prayerful desire as a search committee. And if you are one of the people that read your bulletin Sunday after Sunday, you're familiar with this statement that's printed. We recognize that prayer is foundational to bringing a new pastor to our church. I'm thankful, and you can be too, that the leadership here at Kish places a high value on prayer and encourages us as a body to seek the Lord in all things. The search process was no exception to this. So one of the first things we did as a committee was gather a team of prayer warriors to come alongside of us and faithfully seek the Lord in his will. I want to take the time to recognize these dear friends who have served in this way. So as I call your name, if you could please stand and remain standing. Becky Zimmerman, Miranda Jackson, Celeste Reese, Deb Mattern, Dorothy Eberly, Norma McClure, Fran Shirk, Troy Linthurst, M. Bond, Norma Socio, Jay Klein, Barbara Sabin, Judy Peachy, Julie Martin, and Kathy McIverna. These faithful people have prayed very specifically, very intentionally throughout the last 18 months. I had the privilege of serving with them by sending a weekly email every Tuesday with prayer prompts to guide them in praying. They have been such an encouragement to me along the way. Some have shared how the Lord has worked, how the Spirit has led them to pray specifically, sometimes for a specific committee member, sometimes for you as their church family. And on an occasion, the theme verse that was included in the email was the same one that one person had read and had been chewing on to. Some of these brothers and sisters have joined together in the prayer room during most of our search committee meetings. And we know that there are many others of you in our congregation who have faithfully prayed as well. And I think we all believe without a doubt that this prayer effort has made all the difference and has brought us to the place where we are. So thank you to each of you on behalf of the committee and on behalf of our church. Please continue to pray.
Yeah, thanks, Deb. Next question for Keith. Keith, can you talk a little bit about the steps along the way from the beginning of the process in the spring of 2018, how we received applicants, the interview process, and all that fun stuff?
Okay, I'm going to start by acknowledging the elephant in the room. That it's a rose sitting between two thorns up here. After the preliminary discussions and meetings that Mark just described, the position was listed on a few major church pastor websites. And we had to discuss early on, did we want to pay to put this out there? And the answer was overwhelmingly yes. We wanted to put it where We thought quality people would be looking, and that's what we did. So we paid to put it out there, and in just a few days, the floodgates literally opened up. We received applications from around the globe, from a mix of nationalities and religious backgrounds. We received applications from people in their 30s to late 60s. We even received a few applications from people who said, I'd love to come there, but I need a sponsor. So they didn't even have citizenship for the United States, but they wanted to come here to apply. We received over 100 applications. There was a threefold application process prior to any interviews. After each resume was received, there was 4 of us on the team, both pastors, Pastor Doug, Pastor Chris, Mark, and myself. We reviewed each one of the resumes, and if any of the 4 of us liked what we saw in that applicant, then they were given a level 1 questionnaire. If somebody was not selected, we sent out a very nicely worded email. Thanks, but no thanks. The level 1 application covered their education, their work history, and a few biblical stance questions. We sent out 23 level 1 applications. As they were returned to the group, the entire search committee then looked at the level 1 application and decided, did we want to continue with that applicant or not? The second application was extremely thorough. It was had a lot of biblical-based questions and how it lined up with the Kish, or with the Grace Brethren Statement of Faith. We sent out a total of 9 of those applicants. We did not get all 9 back. I guess some folks saw, these guys are really they want some heavy answers, and we didn't get all those back. So of the initial 9 that we sent out, we selected 2 for interview process. We interviewed one of them over the phone and one of them over Skype. After those interviews, we had to decide as a group, what did we want to do about the way those interviews went? And that's when this process got real. Because, to be quite frank, the discussions that we had were tense. I mean, people were putting their hearts out there, and it was a tense discussion, and feelings were hurt. But we did it all in love, and after feelings were hurt, we made it right. And we just got a little bit, I personally got a little bit discouraged. And as Pastor Doug was going on his sabbatical, we decided to take a step back, cool off, and as Deb earlier mentioned, we just bathed this whole process in prayer. And it was during that process that we were able to just catch a breath and focus on God and His will.
Thanks, Keith. And just kind of as a follow-up to that, can you tell us what the process looked like after that brief month off of prayer and after we had interviewed the first couple applicants?
At the end of the intentional break we took while Pastor Doug was on sabbatical, we received 2 new applicants, Luke Shinsky and another applicant. Both of these were processed through the level 1 and level 2 application process. We came to the unanimous decision to end the process with the first 2 that we had interviewed via phone and via Skype. So we stopped that. We let those folks know via phone call. Mark called them both personally and said, we're going to stop the process with both of you. So we interviewed both Luke and the second candidate here at the church. Their wives were invited to come along, and both interviews went very well. We had 2 extremely good applicants, great wives, great family support. And as the committee was deciding on what step to take with both of these men, the other applicant decided to pursue and accept a position at another church. We continued forward with Luke, committed to honoring the process, willing to start over if we needed to. This process was hard for all of us. It was hard for me because Luke and I are friends. And I wanted to honor this process. And to do that, I had to step back from my friendship with Luke so I would be honest to this process and not just give a rubber stamp. We wanted this to be true. And however, Luke continued to line up his demand for the job, and after we went through the process, he received a unanimous vote from the entire search committee.
Yeah, and Mark, can you talk a little bit more about kind of the timing of Luke's application and how it kind of fell in and all the ways God was working during that time?
Yeah, I'll give a short version because we could do an hour on this. Seriously, if and when anybody wants to ask about that, I would be very excited to tell you a story, but you're going to need time because it was really amazing. So I will give you the short version of this. But from the very first meeting we had, we prayed as a committee that God would bring His choice to Kish in His timing with His provision. And we prayed at each and every meeting, and I'm not going to say I prayed it every day personally, but almost every day I prayed that this would happen. And I believed that that would happen. And I think it has happened. The timing that we received Luke's application was really surreal. Last spring, like Keith said, we had 2 applicants deep into the process. We had interviewed them. We were thinking about which one of these guys to bring in here. And while both of those people were good candidates, we just didn't believe that they were the best candidate that God could provide for us. And in that next meeting, like Keith said, it was timed with Pastor Doug's sabbatical. And we decided as a group, let's just take the entire month of May. And we prayed as a group, and Deb put out to the people that stood here earlier, please pray specifically for this. What is the answer? Are we supposed to go forward with one of these 2 men, or do we start over? And we stepped out in faith, and we started over. And in that meantime was when we had the application from Luke. And that's when we started the process with Luke. The sheer wonder of this was incredible. One of the members of our prayer team came to me and said during that time period that they felt that God had made the choice and that person was selected at that point. And that person didn't even know the details of what was going on at that point. That just kind of gave me another reassurance that we were following God's lead. Key points of our early work with the search team and the elders in developing our values as a church are evident in Luke. During the screening and interview process, it has become very clear that Luke and Ingrid are humble people seeking to conduct themselves with integrity. These were very key points. Value of strong family was another one of the values that the elders saw as key to our church. Luke has made it very clear through this process that that is a driving force in his life to create and maintain a strong family relationship. Priority of discipleship and leadership development. And I know not everybody has post-high teens that would be exposed to this, but Luke and Ingrid have been doing this with our post-high group well before they applied for the position of senior pastor. Luke desires to grow community, and he's done this with that group that I just mentioned, 20, 21-year-old kids. And that group of those 20 and 21-year-old kids and Kate living in State College, college kids, decided to get up early enough that morning that Luke brought his message for candidacy, drive over here, and show their support. And if that doesn't tell you something of the community and the relationships that this guy's building, I'm not sure what will, because it's hard to motivate those kids, especially at 9 o'clock in the morning. During this process with Luke, it's been a very, very encouraging to hear both him and Ingrid talk about their hearts and their passion to lead people through any means available to relationships with Christ. This is very real to them. They are not taking this process lightly. They are very aware of what this means to our church, the transition, and to their family and its transition. Both Ingrid and Luke are very smart, very analytical thinkers. They have taken much time in prayer and seek counsel to bring them to this point. I've been personally challenged by watching them walk through this decision to apply for this position. I believe they fully know well that they are giving up a known lifestyle that they are comfortable in to walk into an unknown for the sake of the kingdom of God and to further His work. I've asked myself time and time again since we began walking this road with the Shinskys if I would do the same. And I'm not sure that I would answer the call that Luke has. The timing of this is not something any of us could have planned on our own. From the time that our search started until now, here is a series of events. When we read the books, everybody said for a successful transition, don't you have somebody within? The answer was no. When we went and talked to the other people that had successful searches, they said, look within. We said, we don't have anybody. God brought us the candidate from within our search body in time to learn alongside of Pastor Doug, a church growing to be mature enough to hand off to the next senior pastor. A church, when the next senior pastor takes over, will be free of a mortgage payment and allow us to pay both of those pastors during the transition time. I don't think any of us, when we started this process, could have put all those dots together had it not been for the prayer and the leading and the following of this whole process.
Thanks, Mark. It's powerful stuff. So just in a sentence or two for any of you that'd like to answer this question. What was the highlight of the search process for you? What did you learn most through this process?
I would just echo Mark. For me, it's seeing the goodness of God, His faithful provision in His timing, watching Him work out His plans and purposes through us. It's hard to really explain in words if you weren't a part of the entire process. But I'll just read the verse from Isaiah 55:89. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts higher than your thoughts.
I think the highlight for me was just to watch how our prayers have been answered from the very beginning. People praying constantly for this process, both within our church and other churches praying us through the process and really seeing the tangible results of those prayers. A couple weeks ago at an event, a guy walked up to me. I had no idea was still praying for us. And they were having a 24/7 church prayer vigil. And our church in this process was part of that. And he asked me where we were at in the process. From the very first meeting, we had people on that committee that were needed for each role. They volunteered for those roles in which they were uniquely gifted. As the process moved along, each and every time we needed a person with a certain gift or a certain thing, it was always provided. It's really been a lesson for me in waiting on God's timing and God's answers to our prayers. This process is really, I've never been part of or witnessed being part of something like this before.
The highlight for me was how our entire group, each of us individuals, how we interacted during the process. Members of the committee were not afraid to challenge each other and speak their minds, but we did it in love. I mean, to me, that's just absolutely amazing how that worked out. It was very evident through all that God was guiding this process, and I believe that ultimately he was honored and will continue to be honored by the process.
Amen. Thanks you guys so much. Can we give them a hand for sharing this morning and being up here?